We are so thankful to have all of our podcasts sponsored here on Three Beards Media by Revelton Distilling Company. Not only do they have amazing products, but they have a beautiful tasting room as well. You can enjoy those spirits while listening to live music each Saturday. They have live music and food trucks on June 18th and the 25th of this month, but they also have a special Father's Day event on Sunday, June 19th. The best way to know what's going on is to go check them out on their Twitter or Instagram page at Revelton DC or follow their Facebook page. Head down to 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, and tell Rob and Christy we said hi. This podcast contains material that is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all listeners. Enjoy!
Would you like to sample some of my nuts?
I don't wanna get on the bandwagon. I'll burn that wagon down and join the band. Traveling troubadours terrorizing street corners just to try to get some supper in our hands. Now I waited all my life to get this off my chest, scream bloody murder until someone understands that it ain't about the money, the drugs, or the women. I make this noise just because I can, and we'll all join in to that original sin. So let's get rowdy and reckless. Let's get rowdy and reckless. Let's get rowdy and reckless. Just for the hell of it. Just for the hell of it.
Hello, and welcome back to yet another edition of Old Man Strength, a podcast brought to you by Three Beards Media and Revelton Distilling Company. I am Tim Johnson, joined as always by Chris Shipley. Chris, how are we doing this evening?
Hot. It's hot out, sweating to death, but I'm doing good. Not bad.
It has been very warm. It's been very warm back in the brewery. We had a carbon monoxide alarm going off in the brewery, so we had to open up the garage door when it was 101 degrees out. So that was not terribly pleasant.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it was not fun, but we're surviving. How was your Father's Day?
It was pretty good. Mom was in the hospital during it, but she's home now. But other than that, it was good. The kids hung out. Caitlin was nice to me all day. So that was nice. And
the greatest gift you could get.
Right? I know. I was a little disappointed. Every year she posts some stupid video that she has, secretly recorded me off Snapchat throughout the year and then post Father Day posts, and she didn't post it this year. So I was slightly disappointed in that, but
I think that's because all of the stuff that she's recorded this past year, she's just ashamed of, I think.
Right. Probably. That's sure.
Excellent. Well, yeah, man, it was a good Father's Day for me, but yeah, it has been miserable. I've been hiding in the basement. Happy to kind of get away from that all, ready for a change, ready for some exciting things we have going on this summer as we keep on talking about our partners over there at Revelton Distilling Company.
Yeah, super excited for what they got going on down there. They've got a couple more events the next few Saturdays. They have a nice 4th of July celebration that they're going to have going on down there. Even go down there, have some drinks, wait for the fireworks to show up on 4th of July. It's going to be a good time down there. So we've got some exciting announcements coming up here and some things moving. So it's a good time to hop on board.
Excellent. Well, I don't want to delay anymore. I'm excited to talk to our guest. We have already talked to one member of his family, but why don't you go ahead and introduce who we are going to be talking to this evening?
Yeah, so on a whim, just scrolling through Twitter the other day, reached out to this gentleman, offered to bring him on to a Cyclone-themed podcast, even though he's a diehard Hawk, former long snapper for the Iowa Hawkeyes. He's now a fitness and nutrition coach and co-host of probably one of the most popular Hawkeye podcasts out there, Washed Up Walkons. Even I listen occasionally it's not all hate. in the state sometimes. But Tyler Kluver, thanks for hopping on with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here. I don't know if I'm as diehard as most people would maybe assume, but I mean, obviously, I'm a fan.
Well, as he literally has
I do. Yeah, I've got the Hawks by a million flag back. That was because I just recorded our show by myself. I had to go solo tonight on a whim, and usually when I'm meeting with clients or somebody else, I'll have my blurred background. But this is what you got. So you guys have to look at that for the hour.
That's okay. The irony that it's Hawks by a million and there's no way that offense could score 1 million points is not lost on me at all.
We don't need it to. The defense and special teams scores our points.
We're aware.
I did see a stat the other day, and Tyler, I'm not picking on the Hawks, but I thought it was really fascinating that they were like one of like 3 teams that had a positive turnover margin, but still a negative yards gained margin on the season last year. Which, to your point, if defense and special teams is going to score all the points, then who needs an offense?
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, you could listen to our show too. I'm not a homer by any means. Like, the offense is terrible. Can I cuss on the show?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yes.
I'm gonna say the offense is fucking terrible. It is what it is. Last year there was a lot of youth on the line, outside of our, maybe potentially one of the top 3 or 5 centers in the history of college football. The other 4 were shaky at best. So a lot of youth. And then behind that, just a quarterback or 2 quarterback options, really, in my opinion, that on their best day is maybe average. So you pair that with a running back who might have been making some business decisions and some ill-advised ones at that, hindsight, and offense wasn't great. Wild to say that, tight ends was a good spot last year and has been since basically
forever
when I came in, and Kittle is there and Ray Hamilton and Jake Doozy and everybody after that. But wide receiver is probably our second best group, and Iowa wide receiver is traditionally not the spot where you want to play. So there were some issues, but somehow, some way, Phil Parker and the Iowa defense and the Iowa special teams probably, hard to not say they're a top 5 unit across the board: punt return, kick return, and then just looking at the specialists as a whole. Unfortunately, really, since I left is kind of when they started to really just go crazy. I think.
I'm sure there's no correlation at all, Tyler.
Well, hopefully I laid a little bit of the groundwork or something, but I'll take no credit. They, over the last 5 years, have been a top 5 unit, and you pair that with a defense that statistically, I'm not exactly sure where they rank, but it had to be top 15. In some stats, it was top 5, top 10. And you got an offense, or you've got a combination that can help balance out the offense. It makes for some really weird football. They went 10-2 last year, and people were pissed every week. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's just sort of a weird year to be an Iowa football fan.
Is it watching it from an outsider's point of view? I mean, I could see that the offense struggled, and I didn't live and die with every game. I root for Iowa when they're not playing Iowa State. I'm okay with that. I'd like to see them do well. But is it hard do you find that most Iowa fans were blind to the fact that they were not as good as maybe their record shows as far as the offense and things like that? Or were people just going along with the ride?
Well, I think that's an interesting perspective. I think, at least in my opinion, after 12 games, like, you are as good as your record. I think again, like, fair. It's that when I say it's weird to be a fan, and that people are pissed because we're 10-2 and it's not fun to watch them. It's because they're doing it in the most sort of outlier, non-traditional way, which is they're going to score a defensive touchdown. They're going to grab special teams points and hidden yardage, and the offense is going to be atrocious, maybe average on a good day, and they're going to win by 3 or 7 points. Yes, you could say, like, after so long and it keeps happening, that is just the way that football team wins games. And I know that people attribute how good a team is to how good offensively they are usually, but it is a 3-phase game. At the end of the year, they were the Big West champions. They went to, the bowl down in Florida. And the other teams weren't in that Big Ten championship game. So, but I think that people didn't really go along for the ride. Like, and this is just my opinion too, but fans get so caught up in like dumb shit, honestly. Like, your team's 10-2. Like, be happy.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would say most Iowa fans I'm familiar with were pissed off most of the season.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, like, man, I'd rather be boring and successful.
Absolutely.
Right. And the games were, like you said, they'd win by 3. They were pretty pedestrian. If there was drama on the season, it was because they were close to a team they shouldn't have been close to. They still managed to win. There was never any game where I think any Iowa fan felt, hey, we are confident, we're dominating, we're whatever, because of the noted, as you mentioned, the noted kind of mundacity of that offense. And so I think certainly people were probably upset that man, we're winning and I can barely stand to watch the game type of
they can't enjoy it because they don't feel any sense of control. I mean, that's in the end, that is what it is. I don't know. It's a tough way to live your life if you can't find a way to be happy about. I mean, that goes a whole lot deeper than just football. But if you can't be happy over something that you can't control and is a hobby, and that's gonna ruin your day or ruin your week, then you got issues.
You probably have issues if you're living and dying with a game played by 18 to 22-year-old kids as it is, right?
I think so. And we've taken shit before on the show about how, the fans are great. They allow us to play the game and, allow the game to be what it is. 70,000 people in the stands on Saturday and millions watching across TV, across the season. But when it comes to, when you talk about real shit, like, people go through in their lives, it's a football game. And so people get a little worked up. They don't think the sun's going to come up. And I hate when I'm a person who, even though I played and I would still call myself, I'm kind of getting old, going to be 28 this year, but recent graduate, right? Like just 5 years ago, this last class that just graduated was the freshman class that came in when I was a senior. So pretty close to the program still. And like, if Iowa loses a game, I'm over it in like 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, and that also may be shifted and swung towards the way I had to deal with it when I was a player. Cause that's kind of how you have to deal with it. Like you got to move on cause you got a new team and already in the windshield that's needs your full attention. But I've always also just been a person who's like, all right, well, it's in the past. Like, can't do anything. Would be dumb to let a football game on a Saturday, make me pissed to wake up on Monday and like go about my day. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So that's a whole other conversation that I've gotten into arguments with our own fans. So.
No, I'd like to actually kind of talk about that more, but I actually want to take a step back a little bit. So for our listeners who are not familiar with you, Tyler, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what you're doing now?
Yeah. For anybody that's listening that listens to our show on a regular basis, they're currently rolling their eyes going, oh, here we go. We got to listen to this guy talk again. I'll try to make it short.
It's their own fault. They're the one that chose to listen knowing that you were on here.
Yeah, that's true. Born and raised Marshalltown, Iowa, 1994. And I grew up with my dad as, my coach for everything. And if it wasn't my dad, it was one of my friends' dads, playing sports. Played soccer until I got a red card when I was 7, cried, walked off the field, never played that again. Was too aggressive. So football was a little bit more my style. Played basketball and football all the way through high school, baseball until 9th grade. I was, typical athlete, just one of the athletes of the grade. Was never special by any means. I'm 5'10". I grew a little bit sooner than a lot of kids did. So high school football wise, freshman year, I was like dominating, and then everybody caught up like sophomore. And as we got older, like 16, 17, 18 years old. So about that time, sophomore year, I realized I was not going to be Josie Jewell, or I guess for this podcast, I was not going to be Mike Rose. Mm-hmm. I was not going to be, Klein. I wasn't going to be any of those linebackers. And that's what I played. And that's what I love to do. I played linebacker from 3rd grade all the way through senior year. And I was good at the high school level, chasing slow kids from Iowa, like Mason City and Fort Dot. Like I could beat up on those kids. I was like a first team all-state linebacker, but I wasn't going D1. And my dad played for the Hawks, he was a 3rd string for 2 years back in the 80s. So, growing up, I'd always seen like pictures of him and the team picture and his practice jerseys. So Iowa football was kind of always like the dream, right? Like it is for any kid who plays football in Iowa. It's either Iowa or Iowa State. Of course, I wanted to find a way to play Division I. And about that time I was 15. It was freshman season. That was the year that Marshalltown miraculously made a run to the state championship, beat Dowling on a last second play in the semis, and then played Iowa City High in the championship. And Marshalltown never does that. Like it was the only time it's ever happened, probably the only time it ever will. And because my dad was a coach, I was along for the ride that season, playing like special teams kickoff as a freshman. Because I was bigger, I was kind of getting playing time. And I had been the long snapper for like 8th grade and my freshman year team. The senior linebacker, middle linebacker, and long snapper blew his knee out in the semifinals. So I had to run in the dome and snap against Dowling and City High in the last quarter of the semis and the full championship game. And then I was kind of set to take over as the starting middle linebacker as a sophomore the next season. And everybody just kind of like, it wasn't even a discussion. It's like, all right, well, you're going to do the long snapping too. At that point, when I kind of knew I wasn't going to be the D1 linebacker, I decided to start focusing on long snapping. And part of that was a family connection to the biggest special teams camp in the country, which is Cole's Kicking, run by Jamie Cole, former Iowa State kicker, who happened to kick at the time when my uncle was his long snapper. So Corey Kluver, my dad's brother, was the starting long snapper in 96, 97 for the Cyclones. And he knew how to do it. We went to all his games. I was an Iowa State fan, I guess. I mean, you can find me in Iowa State clothes up through like 3rd or 4th grade. And so that's kind of why
Shelly, we're going to need some of that, some of that footage.
Yeah. And so that's kind of why I did it. And then we got hooked up with Jamie. I started going to camps. There's a lot of luck involved in my story. I was for some stupid reason, like why would I or anybody be good at long snapping? But I just was. For some reason, I just had a knack for it. Those camps run on a ranking system. The first camp I went to, I come away ranked 11th in the country in the class of 2013. And that was really the eye opener for me. Like, oh shit, I might be able to do this at the highest level, because at the time I'm ranked 11th and I could get on the same website and look at the class before me and look at the top 10, 15 guys that were ranked in the class of 2012. And all of them had committed to a Division I football school. So from that point on, when I see something can be done, that's no longer a hope. It's now the expectation. Mm-hmm. So as the 11th ranked guy, in my mind, it's like, oh, I'm going D1 now. Like, that's just what it is. I'm going to do what I can to climb the ranks from 11 to as high as I can go, but I'm going to end up D1 somewhere. Which is crazy to think now that was my mindset, but that's just how I went about it. Kept going to camps, got all the way ranked to 4th my senior year. And this is like on the cusp of when special teams rankings and being like ranked high was starting to be cool. It still wasn't cool. When you're the 4th ranked lineman or DB in the country, that's fucking cool. When you're the 4th ranked long snapper, nobody cares still.
Yeah. I mean, like when you see all these, 40 and 50-year-old guys geeking out about recruiting commitments, you never see anyone be like, oh man, look at this long snapper we signed today. Yeah. Like that. It doesn't happen. You're right.
You can sign the number 1 guy in the class, the number 1 kicker in the class, the number 1 punter in the class in the country, and it still doesn't matter. No one gives a shit. Like, so, and especially because those rankings are a little like, those might not be there's more variance in special teams because it's so mental. Mm-hmm. A lot of the other rankings, those guys are going to come in and they're playing football. It's athletic. It's on the fly. It's ability.
Well, and I can give you stats too. Like, I can tell you this running back has X number of yards.
Right.
Like, what stats do you really show for a long snapper to really show?
Right. Yeah. It's just, it just doesn't matter as much. So I'm number 4. I'm going into, like, it's right around this time, my junior summer going into senior year. And I was pretty happy. Like, I had gone to the Iowa camp, Northern Illinois, Minnesota, Nebraska. I had basically all but been officially offered from Wyoming and Eastern Michigan. And so I had options. And my dad's like, hey, let's go to one more camp for the summer just to tune up for the season. And it happened to be like it's called the National Showcase Camp, which is where the top 2 kickers, punters, and long snappers, just top 2, 1 for each team, get selected for the Under Armour All-American game. I went up to the camp, had no expectations, wasn't even really aware of like what the Under Armour thing was, or that was the end all be all of this specific camp. Long story short, I go up and have a great weekend. I was in great snapping shape. I was on fire, sort of that summer, and I won the camp. And I was like the automatic bid for the Under Armour All-American game, which like sort of then changed things another level. I got a letter from Saban. I got a letter from Auburn, Miami. At that point, they're like, okay, because those teams all call Jamie Cole and they go, hey, give me your top 3 guys. Mm-hmm. And then we'll bring them in and we'll look at them. So I was the second choice for Bama. I was the second choice for Auburn. I was the second choice for Nebraska. A lot of second choices, probably due to my size, which ended up being a repeat situation when it came time to train for the NFL. But nonetheless, Iowa, I had gone in and snapped for them and struck up a relationship where they're like, hey, you're on our recruiting list now. You're going to come to the Saturday recruiting trips, whatever. And the first game of the year was UNI in 2012. And before that game on the Saturday, like lunch. At the time it was Coach Lester Erb. He since moved on from Iowa, but he's like, hey, we've got a walk-on spot for you if you're interested, and we'd love if you were a Hawkeye. And I don't know why I wasn't just like, yep, I'm in right there. I tried to like play it cool. I came back the week later and told him, like, all serious, like, yeah, I'd love to be a Hawkeye. But inside I was like, holy shit, I'm going to be a Hawkeye. So that was my journey. Like, it's so hard to get your foot in the door of a Division I football program. And somehow I did it. More luck happened. It happened to be a year where Iowa had a senior long snapper who had 1 season left. And then I was literally the second guy on the roster. For some reason, like, they had attrition, couple guys left. When it came time for spring ball in 2014, I was the only guy. I didn't even have to earn my job. So I stepped into 4 years of starting, still to this day, and it will be hard to beat unless they go to multiple Big Ten championships in a guy's career. I hold the record for most consecutive starts as a Hawk at any position.
Oh, wow.
With 53. And I had I did my job. I worked hard, and was able to be a decent long snapper, had a good career. Like I said, NFL didn't want me. Got out a year later. It's our first year out of playing. We're watching like the third game of the year, and me and my boys are talking like, damn, this sucks. Like, I really wish we were still playing. And, we're telling stories to each other, and we're laughing just in a text conversation. And someone goes, it would be cool if we could like write a book or like come out with these stories somehow and like share these with the fans, or share the behind the scenes with the fans. Not like the crazy inside Iowa football secrets or anything, but just like an inside perspective.
Sure.
And I was like, well, we could do a podcast, and I'm tech savvy enough to put that together. An hour later, I figured it out. A week later, we recorded episode 1, and what started as a show where we thought maybe 500 or 1,000 people would listen has turned into nearing 3 million downloads, a brand that sells merchandise and has a whole paywall with private content behind it. We're like an actual business with like 3 tiers of income. And we're, as of the episode I just recorded before I got on here, we're 327 episodes deep. And it just got lucky. Like, no one was doing it, and people enjoyed us, and we're unfiltered, and we're pretty straightforward, and we don't hold back. And
so you definitely went pro based off of your college career, just maybe at a slightly different trajectory than you had thought.
Yeah, it just weird. Like, I don't know. People hit me up all the time. They're like, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. Do you have any tips and advice? And I'm like, don't expect to make any money, because it's probably not going to happen. Like, even when people like say like, oh, you guys have done so well, like, when they give us the credit, I still deflect that, because it's not like I'm like, I don't know. It's not like I'm special, or the other 2 guys I'm with are, well, one of them is pretty special, but like, our platform, because we played for the university, allowed us to have a lot of followers. And then because we were just authentic and wanted to talk Iowa football, and we happened to also play Iowa football a year previous, people wanted to listen. Now, I guess the staying power of the brand and what it's turned into, yeah, maybe there was some, sort of untapped potential that for some reason the 3 of us and the way we vibe on a microphone, on a podcast, and my ability and fortunate life situation to be able to pursue it as an actual business and have consistency and put out consistent episodes and create other branches that make money, like the merchandise and the private content for subscribers and stuff like that. There was some business savvy in there, but I don't know. It just the right mixture of falling into the right place, right time.
What was your major in college?
My major is in exercise science, which is actually the other half of what I do. So, when people ask what I do, it's kind of weird to tell them I'm a podcaster. Like, people don't really get that. I do say it because at this point it is true.
Mhm.
I personally actually do make a 50, like the 50% of my income actually comes from the Washed Up Walk-Ons, which is so sick. It's like the dream. Couldn't have it any better. My life is crazy, insane, just fortunate. And the other 50% is exercise science major, big time into CrossFit. It doesn't pay the bills, but a large percentage of my days is spent being basically a professional CrossFit athlete at this point, which I started getting into a couple years ago and really made serious last fall. And with that, I remote coach people. That's what I say. It's so weird to like kind of describe it. Essentially, it's like I'm a personal trainer that doesn't actually do the sessions with you, right? I program.
Accountability.
You're neither personal nor trained.
Right. Like I will meet with you, create an entire customized workout plan based on your goals, and also work with you on nutrition strategy and sort of diet. But it's all from a remote sort of setup where once I give you the program, it's on you to go into the gym every day and hit it. And then we'll talk about it on a weekly basis over a Zoom call. On that same Zoom call, we'll go over, the last week of tracked food. So I'm an online coach, and I run about 16 clients right now, one-on-one clients with that. So, my entire day, Monday through Friday, is essentially doing social media for both of those things, as well as programming workouts on a daily basis, new stuff every day for a new client for a new month, scheduling podcast guests, editing the podcast, putting that together, publishing it. The podcast has grown to a spot where like we're under iHeart. Like, sure. I'm not even sure. We're just a part of iHeart's network. So we're signed with them. So oftentimes I'm reading and doing, cutting sponsorship reads or ad reads for them, or doing other stuff because I kind of do other work for iHeart as well. It's just kind of random every day, and I get to do two things that are awesome and that I love and that I don't even consider work. So that is who I am and what I do. And that's 15 minutes of me talking about myself. And you can clearly tell that I enjoy talking about myself and hearing myself speak. So I'll shut up now, but it's more so it comes from a place of like, I try to get across how stupid and unique my life is. And it just like, I don't know. It's incredible.
Tyler, I'm sure as a podcast guest, you can, or podcast host, you can relate to the idea of, boy, I bring on guests so they don't talk.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right about that. So for you guys are sitting here going, wow, this is fucking great.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because I do have those times where not even when we have guests, it's really easy, but on our normal show, it's me and the other two. And the other two aren't necessarily the most inclined to really elaborate and go into detail and talk about another subject and so I have to sort of be the producer and kind of guide the flow of the show. And oftentimes I have to interject and revamp a conversation so that they can keep going. And when we get a guest that just keeps talking, I just sit there and I'm like, wow, this is great. All I have to do is take the file and edit this when we're done.
Right.
I don't have to do it or create any content here.
There are times where I'll have an episode and I'll be like, I'll write little marks down of time or whatever, just to go back and find it. And I'll look and go, I maybe got 5 minutes of editing here.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Like there wasn't any bad parts where Zoom kicked out or this or that, or there was some awkward, or somebody dropped, any of that stuff. So I get it. I'm curious because we've talked a lot about on this podcast about challenges in life, or when you are faced with something and you're like, okay, do I have enough courage to do this? Is this really what I should do?
Sure.
I'm guessing not doing a podcast before and not expecting this to be where it was at some point it came about where you were like, I got to make a decision here. Is this really something that I can do and make a living at it? And or is this just a pipe dream? Like at some point, there's a decision you have to make of whether or not you have enough courage to go, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Again, there definitely was some of that, and I'll describe that in my own way here in a second, but pretty fortunate on this front too, where again, because of our platform, it all happened so fast, right? I graduated in December and played my last game, and then whatever, January, this was back when Iowa still had a Twitter ban. So I get on Twitter, and, you know, over the course of those 6-8 months, I go from like 1,200 followers on Twitter to 5,000, right? Just because I'm tweeting about Iowa, and so sort of like, you know, the Twitter condensed version of what we do with the podcast. I was giving inside perspective, thoughts and opinions, all this stuff in the Hawk world. And people saw it as, oh, this guy's a player who provides value to me in my Hawkeye hobby so we'll follow him. And so when and you guys will relate to this, people who don't have a podcast probably don't understand the numbers behind this. We launched our podcast, and obviously we're pumping it on Twitter. The first week we had 1,200 people listen to it in the first 7 days. I thought that was nuts. The second week we had 3,500 listen to the second episode. By week 3, we had hit 5,000 downloads per episode in its first 7 days, which is one of the sort of metrics. So like
that's dumb, Tyler. That's
stupid, right? Like we didn't earn that. People were just like, shit, we got former Iowa football players who have a podcast. And, you know, those first episodes were god awful, but they were better than anything else because there wasn't anything else.
Right.
So everybody's telling their friends and tweeting about it, and it's just like word of mouth. So for those that don't quite understand that on a financial level, our audience quickly, almost immediately, was at a level that was monetizable at a serious level. Now,
like instantaneously.
Yeah.
We definitely did not capitalize on that for way too long, and it actually hurts me a little bit that we didn't. But again, like I didn't know what we were doing.
Right. You just didn't know. You didn't know what gold mine you were sitting on.
We were on episode 3. No one even knows if this thing's going to go past 6 episodes, right? So the dilemma of, and I know what you're talking about. A lot of people who get into content creation, whether it be being a YouTuber or a podcaster or whatever it may be, called an influencer. That's a fucking horrible word.
We're not influencing shit on this show.
The phrase content creator was not a thing. Certainly, like when Chris and I were growing up and we were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Content creator would not be a thing like ever uttered out of our mouths. Yeah.
So a lot of people nowadays who can make money on the internet and with their own personal brand, there is a grind period of, I really gotta
establish yourself.
So, or I got to do this in my free time after my 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Or something to where I have to build this for months, maybe years, to a level at which, okay, I can finally quit the secure paycheck and I'm actually making enough money to sustain myself. And even most people, when they finally do that, they're like barely getting by, but then they finally have their whole day, their whole week to start to put into the content creation. So it takes off and they finally get to a level that's comfortable. For me, there was a little bit of that. Right out of college, I got a job basically volunteering at a CrossFit gym because before podcaster remote coach was going to be my thing, I was going to own a CrossFit gym. I found CrossFit in 2012, basically had 6 months to mess around and do it and enjoy the sport side of it. Mm-hmm. And really just all sides of CrossFit. And then I was into Iowa football where I didn't really get to do CrossFit because we were training for Division I football. And that's a whole different sort of thing. But it was always a hobby on the backside of when I was in school. Exercise science degree. Cool. I'm going to get out. I'm going to own my own gym. it's that fucking easy, I thought.
I do love the naivete of being 22.
Oh man. And so I thought, cool, I'm going to have to grind for a little bit. My wife, who I grew up with from 6th grade at Marshalltown I did 5 seasons because of the red shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So she was working her first year of work, which she's a teacher, was my senior year. So she had already established herself here in Waukee where we live. So there was income, right? And we were engaged going into that in my final season. So we were going to be together. We were both pretty good with money. So I'm not going to come out of college and we're not going to be dead broke, but I got to find some way to make money.
Right.
So I was going to volunteer coach my way up into an assistant coach position, into a head coach position, into a part ownership position. And then finally, maybe in 3 to 5 years, I'll have enough capital to open my own gym and run. And that was, while I love coaching and love CrossFit, that was not the way. It just wasn't, for many reasons. So while I was volunteering, I got a job managing a kid's Ninja Warrior gym, like 6 hours a day.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It just like standing at the front desk, checking kids in and sending them back to the jungle gym. It helped pay the bills. Right.
Here, and go break a leg.
Right. There were several, actually more of the injuries came from the adults, the parents who tried to get in and do it as well. But that gave me some sort of income, right? 30 hours a week, while we figured it out, right? It was enough. And then, and in my head, it was like, cool, until I find a full-time fitness coaching job at a gym somewhere, this will do. So there wasn't a whole lot of that stress you're asking about, that courage where I'm like, oh, I'm really taking a chance here. Eventually I found a job coaching at a place called Elite Edge. It was basically basically a full-time gig. I got that job in October of 2019. I got fired, let go, because the gym wasn't doing well. 5 months later, 2 weeks before COVID happened. So there was like a 2-week period where I was like, fuck, I gotta figure out what I'm going to do. And I had been doing the podcast, and it had grown into like, we're making 300, 400, 500, maybe $600 a month on the podcast, but split between the three of us, $600 a month is $2,000 a year for you. Right. Yeah, that's not going to do much. And again, lucky, I get laid off. I was going on a trip with my in-laws and my wife. So I was going to wait till I came back to actually like seriously look into finding a job. In that 2-week span, 2:30 in the morning, I'm laying awake and I'm like, I have this like lucid dream, half in, half out, full 2-hour session where I create what I still run to this day is known as the 30-day challenge. Mm-hmm. It's a fitness challenge I run that's based on like intermittent fasting. And it's very simple, just 30 days to kind of get your shit together, both nutritionally and exercise wise. And I launched the challenge like the day before we go to vacation in the Cayman Islands. And in the time it took that we left the airport and we're traveling, and then we land at the connection flight, and then we get down to the Caymans, in like 12 hours, I made $7,000.
Oh, wow.
I sold the challenge for like $70, and 100 people joined. Like, and a light bulb went off. I've always felt like I was different and I was going to find a way to do it different. I don't know how to describe that. It's just a feeling I've had, and I'd find my own path. I had been making a little bit of money on the podcast and saw the potential there, which is a lot of the reason why we stayed consistent with it. And then I started making a little money entrepreneurially, if you want to call it that way, through just a Shopify store and a challenge. After the challenge, I started taking on clients for X amount of money per month. And I was like, well, I ain't ever fucking working again. Like there's no way I'm doing this.
Right.
No, Tyler, I hate you because of this. Like that's literally been the idea, is to find something that people can latch on. You're humble enough to say that it's luck, but it's really ingenuity and leveraging the opportunities that you've been given. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the amazing things. You mentioned, you've got listeners because people like to hear what athletes have to say.
Sure.
Right. I mean, that's the whole appeal of Draymond Green. I mean, you can argue whether or not Draymond Green should be doing a podcast in the middle of an NBA.
I think it's great.
Championship series. Yeah, I think it is too. I do understand why people would think it's a distraction or whatever. But
I mean, listen, if Dennis Rodman is hanging out with Carmen Electra in the middle of the finals, I don't think a podcast is legend.
I don't think Dennis Rodman is necessarily a thing that too many athletes necessarily. I'm not saying he was not a fantastic, unbelievable defender and rebounder, but I don't think there are a whole lot of people trying to model a lot of their behavior or lifestyle after Dennis Rodman.
To answer the short answer to that long-winded answer that I gave is I always just kind of had enough to where I wasn't too worried. There was definitely times where I was like, man, I gotta figure out like a steady income that's more than what I'm making, right? Like at least something respectable, something that isn't like 20 grand a year, right? Which is where I was at, like coaching part-time. And the podcast and sort of that COVID thing hit and I made $7 grand, and that gave me a little buffer to be like, hey, to my wife, hey, is it okay if I pursue, like, I'm not going to go get a job somewhere. I'm going to try and do this. So there was a moment of like, can I just do the pod? I think. And then what do you know, like 3 months later in June, a company called Blue Wire reaches out and they want to bring us on to their network of sports podcasts. They're like a startup out of San Francisco. We immediately start making from their advertisements that they sell on our podcast. Like we signed a 1-year deal with them, spent 1 year with them. We were making somewhere between like $1,600 and $2,000 a month, which split between the three of us is $8,000, but it's a little more and it shows promise. And it's something to convince the wife, like, hey, I think we can keep building this. And I'm making money on the fitness stuff too. And then eventually, like the money just got bigger. Started selling merchandise. And you look up and 2, 3, 6 months later, the monthly income, although it's sort of comes in spurts and not always guaranteed, it's like, okay, well, I'm making a full-time income doing these two things. So I'm just going to.
Meanwhile, you're supported by your wife's fat teacher salary.
Yeah, the super fat Des Moines Public funding. So, yeah,
you and me both, Tyler. You and me both. My wife's a teacher for Des Moines Public Schools.
Love it. And so, we were always just like plenty okay, and I never had to. I mean, there was a definite time where, in the beginning, I felt super guilty because I was podcasting. I remember sitting in bed and there was one night where like the wife doesn't, in the beginning when this wasn't the job, the wife like doesn't understand why I want to go talk to my friends for an hour. And then back then when I didn't know what I was doing, the editing is taking me like an hour or 90 minutes. Right. So I'm spending, and then there's the upload process. So I'm spending like 3 hours twice a week for no ROI. And, she's kind of getting irritated. And there was one night where I was like, I like sat down with her and I was like, I feel guilty because I'm doing this thing. And I can feel that it's causing like a little pressure on you and you don't necessarily love it. And like, I think I broke down like crying because I was like, I don't want to like, strain the relationship because I'm doing something. And she's like, I did. And then she was like, I didn't know you felt that much guilt and all this stuff. And it'd be like, but there was a moment where it was like, what's this whole podcasting thing about? Like, what are we doing? So it hasn't all been roses, but way more rosy and like walking through flowers than most podcasters.
I say no, Tyler. I get that as a single dad with 2 barely monetized or basically not monetized podcasts.
Hey, we're working on it.
Understand?
We're working on it. And I get it too. One of the things that I find fascinating is we've had guests on: Chris Williams, John Miller, Rob Taylor from Revelton Distilling Company. One common theme that they've had is they've all had this dream or this idea to start something, and it probably is a crazy idea, but they've all had a wife that's been supportive and that said, I trust you, let's do this together, or, you go do your thing and we're good. And that's really important. I mean, I even in the small scale that we do this, I get the same support from my wife. Who you're recording with tonight. I'm really proud of you for what you do and the theme that you had. When we talked about starting a podcast, Tim and I jokingly said we were just going to come on here and be 2 old men yelling and bitching all the time. And my wife was like, you can do what you want, but that does not sound like any fun whatsoever. She was right. And we've, I think, turned this into something that's fun and positive and talking to people like you that talk about how passionate they were and are authentic about what they do. But a supportive wife has always been, I think, a key in a good, career.
It's gotten to the point where it's like, it's funny. We have this running joke where she has a good idea for the podcast or for something we do merch wise, or some idea that relates to the brand. And she'll, we'll talk about it, and then I'll be like, yeah, tomorrow when I, sit down to do my stuff, like I'll get into that. And then I'll get a notification on my phone, and it's a Venmo request for $5 or $10 from my wife. And it's like our joke, like, okay, she's on the payroll for every good idea. I got to pay her from our mutual account.
I was going to say a one-time fee is way better than having to pay her a licensing fee. So
right, that's right.
So it's funny. She does have a ton of great ideas, and oftentimes she's the one, like last year, because of the podcast and the popularity, and I guess I've proven somewhat useful and valuable on a microphone. I was asked by the Cedar Rapids station to do the post-game show after Dolph and Podolak are done with their hour and a half post-game. Then it goes to the local stations, and the CR Iowa City region. I was one of the co-hosts for that show last year. I'll probably be doing that again this year. And she's the one, when opportunity comes up like that, like, yeah, definitely go do that. Like I'm like, I don't know. Then I'm going to have to like go to the games, and then we're going to have to drive to, like, she's following me to Cedar Rapids after night games last year.
And like, who wants to go to Cedar Rapids?
like multiple times. So we ended up going to all the home games last year. And then after the home games, we a few of them, we left literally as time is expiring. We're walking to the car so that we can get up to Cedar Rapids to the radio station so that I can be there for when we come on. And she's just sitting there listening to it. She doesn't give a fuck about Iowa football. And just following me to Iowa City and back. So it's just like if I didn't have her, I don't know where I'd be. I'd be working out way more than I already do, which is already insane amount. And I'd probably be hurt all the time. And the podcast would be a runaway train show.
Well, I mean, you do CrossFit. I do CrossFat, which is just different ways for me to sit on the couch eating food.
Good.
Amen, brother.
So Tyler, what is something so for our listeners that might not be familiar with Washed Up Walk-Ons, explain a little bit more. I mean, you've kind of touched on it, but tell us a little bit about what that podcast is really all about.
Yeah, the elevator pitch is essentially we are 3 former players who all walked onto the program, basically paid 80%, or between the 3 of us, I think we probably paid 80% of the actual expenses of going to college at Iowa. I was fortunate to be on 2 years of scholarship. The other two flirted with a semester here and there towards their junior, senior seasons, but all walked on, paid our way, and all made it into the senior season, which is very elusive. And the podcast is our behind the scenes perspective from the inside, from guys who have been there, unfiltered. We don't answer to anybody. We're the Barstool-esque podcast of Iowa football and Iowa sports in general. We'll dive into a little bit of basketball here and there, the big games, Caitlin Clark, the wrestling a little bit. But yeah, just the behind the scenes, unfiltered look at Iowa football from three guys who have been there. During the season, we do like probably, I don't know, you guys probably do similar stuff. Like we preview the games and then we'll recap the games. Episodes every Monday, Thursday. Over the course of a year, we'll probably miss 4 or 5 of those Mondays or Thursdays, but pretty consistent. Like I said, 327 episodes. And in the off season, we try to bring on our friends who play in the NFL or guys that they know or other relevant Iowa sport, not icons, but figures or relevant people. We had Jordan Bohannon on. We had one of the gymnasts on recently. When they cut Iowa swimming and diving, we had a swimmer on. Like we'll have anybody who's relevant in the Iowa sports scene, and that's it. And we're a lot of it is just 3 bros just bullshitting, and people like that, I guess.
Nice. Well, we're gonna take a quick break here so we can grab a word from our sponsor. We will be back here in just a second. Once again with Tyler Kluver.
This Three Beard Media podcast is sponsored by Revelton Distilling Company. When Rob and Christy Taylor started following the Kentucky Bourbon Trail in 2012, they fell in love with not only bourbon, but the entire distilling process. And just 8 short years later, in 2020, Revelton Distilling Company was opened, offering an entire family of products including vodka, gin, whiskey, and Revelton Shine. Come visit the tasting room at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, where you can sample one of their many spirits, including 4 gold medal winners. Can't make it to Osceola today? Not a problem, as you can pick up some at your local Hy-Vee or Fairway grocery store. Be sure to follow Revelton Distilling on Twitter or Instagram at ReveltonDC or their website, www.reveltondistilling.com.
And we are back. Once again, you are listening to Old Man Strength. If you don't know that, I don't know how you have gotten an hour in at this point. But we appreciate you listening to this podcast of Three Beards Media. Please go ahead and check us out on the web at threebeardsmedia.com. We have a lot of exciting things in the works. More to come. Chris, any other things you want to talk about with that before we get chatting back with Tyler?
I mean, let's make sure that we plug Bitter Unit, your other podcast, the beer podcast with you and Aaron and JT. You guys do an amazing job on there. We have, we brought on a 23-year-old social media expert, Mackenzie Duffy. So she's taking over all our social media stuff.
McKeel O'Neill.
That's right. So we're evolving. We're trying to get there, but super excited for what we got coming up. I can't announce anything yet, but I have a meeting tomorrow night with a new sponsor, and hopefully they'll be on, and then we may be launching a couple new podcasts. So the network is small but mighty. How about that?
I like it. So again, we're talking with Tyler Kluver of Washed Up Walkons of Iowa Hawkeye fame.
No.
Speaking of fame.
But no, so Tyler, you were talking about kind of the how you guys are unfiltered. You have great takes on anything kind of to do with Iowa sports. Have you heard from anyone in the athletic department in any way, shape, or form on kind of their thoughts? I imagine you're still connected with the athletic department in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, we so the coaches And a lot of it's funny. I was actually just back on Thursday, almost a week ago. I was asked to come in and run the long snapping portion of the special teams camp. It was me running the long snapping portion. They had Keith Duncan and Nate Kading running the kickers, and Jason Baker and Torrey Taylor running the punters. So long snappers got the short end of the stick on that day. But clearly I didn't distance myself too far to be asked back to do that. Still talk to Coach Woods on a probably a monthly basis. Coach Wallace, who's the linebacker coach, used to be the special teams coordinator before Coach Woods. Talk to him on a fairly often basis. They listen to the show, which is wild, nuts. Mm-hmm. Even Coach Ferentz has listened to several of the more popular episodes.
Oh, wow.
Which is stupid. A waste of his time, but it has happened. And they're very aware of what we do. The coaches love it. We're almost always pro Iowa. Like in the end, we are going to be pro Iowa, right?
Right.
There's been plenty of times where we question coaching decisions or players, but it's really been weird for me because the other day I walk in the complex when we were back in Iowa City, and there's all of the players there now are guys that I did not play with. I don't know any of them personally except for Riley Moss because he's a friend of my brother. But they know who I am. Sure. And come up to me and introduce themselves because they've heard the podcast or because they know of the brand. The Hawks by a Million, what you see behind me is obviously one of the more well-known pieces of what we do. And it's just weird that players listen to us and follow us. And athletic department wise, I don't know about athletic department. We've gotten in trouble with the licensing department.
Oh, sure. I don't think it's possible to ever talk about college sports without that.
And we kind of won the battle with this whole Hawks by a Million thing. We kind of got that university to back down on that, which is dope. But yeah, like we still talk to the coaches. There's once or twice or even 3 times a year. Sometimes they do them the nights before games. They'll have alumni. What do they call them? Hawkeye Legacy events for any Iowa football alumni to come back, and they do it like a brewery or the nice new end zone in Kinnick. There's a place to serve food and have an event up there. So they'll bring back former players, and gone to a couple of those, and all the coaches still know who I am and come up and say, "Hey, Kluver, what are you doing? And how you doing? And how's the wife?" And it's just, yeah, we're still in touch, and it's really weird. It's pretty cool.
I love the idea of Coach Kirk actually listening. Like I can imagine you being back in the facilities and him just looking at you and then just like shaking his head and moving on. But
the question is when is Coach Ferentz making an appearance on Watchdown Walkons?
That is the big question. I don't think that's ever going to happen. If it did, it's going to be in 2029 when this new contract he just signed is over, at which point he'll be into his 70s. And so, I mean, it would be one hell of an episode. We'll get a shitload of downloads.
Look, I'm putting the challenge down. We have had a former Iowa State coach on. We've had the current Iowa State athletic director on our humble little podcast. So I'm just challenging you right there.
We no doubt could ask him. It's out of pure respect that we don't.
Or fear that he might actually say yes.
And the thing is he actually, because of who he is, he's that kind of guy. He probably would be like, if I could find time, I'll see if I can get you guys in. But out of respect to the university, because we are sort of an unfiltered podcast where we want guys who played or who we played with to open up and tell some of the funny, more kind of out there stories that might make you look bad while you're still in the university or attached to the university. Yep. We actually don't bring on any current players or current coaches.
That makes sense.
And that's just been like a personal rule of ours. I've always joked that like when the content starts to slide and the and the brand starts to go downhill and become irrelevant, then that's when we'll change that rule.
Have you had on former coaches? I know you said former players, but
a couple. Tim Polisek came on. He was the O-line coach our last season and through 2020. Now he's back as the offensive coordinator. He's out as the OC at Wyoming. We've had a couple others on, but yeah, no current.
Well, unfiltered. So we'll ask then your best unfiltered Kirk Ferentz story.
Let's see. I mean, he would always talk about Penn State in like a really interesting way. I don't know if it's like the most like unfiltered funny, but like he's very, I mean, you've seen him, like he's so well spoken and he's just so and it's truly who he is. But like behind closed doors, locker room talk, he's still one of the guys. And so he will sit, he cusses all the time, especially when he gets going. And we played Penn State 2 or 3 times during my time. And I think the first time, you know, he gets a little fired up, like in the first meeting of the week. And he would just stand up there and say, you know what, these fucking guys, they're going to look better than you. All right. They're going to be fucking way more athletic than you. All right. And ESPN is going to ride their dicks all week. Okay. None of that fucking matters at all. Okay. And he would just keep going and he'll cuss and he'll like really get into it. Wild, crazy KF stories. There just aren't any. Like he's just not that kind of guy. But some of his team meeting speeches, and we do that impression all the time on the podcast. Pretty good stuff.
I mean, he's a I hate to use this word, but he's almost boring in some ways. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely, very dry sense of humor.
Yeah, right. Very dry. Very, very.
I mean, he's 66. I mean,
but I mean, I've seen a lot guys older than him get a lot more fired up, and nothing seems to get him to externally.
I think he recognizes, and it's man, what an example for me, because it was one of the biggest things that I always, for some reason, latched onto of who I wanted to become as an adult, just a human on this earth, was I always want to make decisions and react in any situation with logic and not emotion. And KF is very good at that. He recognizes that anger or frustration. I mean, he gets pretty fired up with some referees on the sideline. Like he will fucking slam his headset. There's plenty of clips of that. But when it comes to like talking to the team, he maybe yelled at us one time in my 53 starts, like legitimately got on our ass. And that was when we were playing like shit at Rutgers. And he was basically just like, hey, you stupid ass. Like he really went into it. Realize that you guys should be playing way better than this. And it was like a 30-second little rant, and then he was gone. But he's just like, he doesn't react or execute any reactionary plan or strategy with emotion. It's all based on logic. And it's because emotion clouds judgment and wastes time. And logic is the quickest, most efficient way. And he's very good at being efficient and good.
He's sort of anti-Fran in some ways, where Fran's emotion is out there for everyone to see at all times, which is a double-edged sword. I think it's great. I think it gets his players riled, ready to go, and they rally around him. But also, I think at the same time, I think, Fran sometimes does coach a little bit more from emotion.
100%. And it's, I'm not even saying that ignoring and pushing away emotion in the face of making big time decisions in stressful situations during a game is the way to do it. It's just the way that I like to do things in my life when it comes to big time decisions that matter. And And I think it's the best way. It might not be the best way, but Coach Ferentz is really good at doing it. And that's his style. And I think it's one of the many, many reasons that he's found a lot of success and longevity.
So what prompted me to ask you to come on was a tweet last week of you in the Stanford game.
Hardly of me, but
well, you're there. I
tweeted it. I am in the picture. I am far, far away.
And I said, as a Cyclone fan, I took no pleasure in that game, and I didn't, because I'd give my left testicle to even play in the Rose Bowl, let alone get blown out in one.
I don't even think it was fun for Stanford.
No, I think it was fun for anybody. What are your? I mean, what was that? This is such a cliche question, but I mean, clearly it was no fun. But just what happened there? What?
Oh, you know that old cliche. What happened there?
What happened there? How did it feel to get beat? No, those are such terrible questions. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is like that. At some point, you're like, can we just speed the clock up? Is this over? What?
Yeah, fucking immediately, basically.
Right.
I mean, we were really dejected from that Big Ten championship. Like, felt like we just let it slip.
That was a heartbreaker.
That hurt. And I think we carried some of that with us. We were more beat up than I think people probably knew. I think that Stanford was simply better than us. Just, we play 10 times. I think they win 7 or 8 of them. Definitely not as good as the scoreboard showed, but you let a fucking boulder roll down a hill and it gets going pretty fast and you can't stop it. We're
Cyclone fans. We absolutely understand that.
Yeah, and we
welcome to the 1980s and part of the 90s,
and we let that happen. Like we, very similar to like the opposite of what happened in the Ohio State game when we won 55-24.
Right.
Like we had no business beating them at all, let alone by 30.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes to show like it's 11-on-11, 18 to 22-year-old dudes out there. Like anybody can beat anybody. Generally it is going to be like, oh, this team's generally going to win. This team probably isn't as good as most teams, whatever. There's some themes that carry week to week, but we fucked up and we let him score on the first play. And then we got scared. And I mean, granted, he was and still is one of the most fucking electric athletes there is, but you can't let him get hot. And then you play a little timid. You don't want to mess something up. And then and they just take advantage of that. And then offense can't stay on the field. Defense is tired. So they just, it exponentially gets worse and worse. And all of a sudden it's 42-0. And you're like, well, this is not like the way I wanted the end of the California trip to work out, but it is what it is. Outside of the result, like playing in the Rose Bowl was sweet. It was one of the coolest things ever. Bomber jet went over during the national anthem, like running out onto that field. And it was hell of an experience. But yeah, the picture specifically that I put up was him returning a punt on us. And if you go to the clip on YouTube, you can pause it. And he catches the ball. And we have basically our two gunners are kind of like right on his hip, about 1.5 yards diagonally from him. He steps up into a gap to basically where, if you freeze frame it, there's 4 guys all around him and he gets out of it somehow. Like just that field was unfathomably slick and evidently just not to him. So he's making cuts and we're slipping all over the place. And like, it was fucking bad news bears from there. Not good.
It seems like a trendy thing as of late has been for sports analysts to debunk the idea of momentum. And I would agree that momentum can shift pretty quickly, but sometimes there is something to be said for, like you said, that boulder rolling down the hill and you change the way you're playing based off of what you're seeing, and sometimes that exacerbates that momentum, and it becomes a thing all in and of itself that it is hard to get in front of and just cascades.
It's not impossible to stop. I even have a teammate that was a fullback a couple years younger than us that loves to talk about this whole idea of momentum in sports and how it's not real. I don't agree with that. I don't think that it's not real. I do think it's absolutely 100% impossible to quantify or somehow make tangible, but it is 100% real when Christian McCaffrey takes the first, we've been watching on film him fucking destroy teams all year. We're like, okay, I think we got a game plan where we're going to stifle this guy. We're going to win this game. First play, they run an angle route and he runs away from our entire defense. And everybody kind of looks at each other like, oh shit, are they actually as good as they look? And then everyone plays. And this is the intangible part of it, is like, then everybody plays just 0.25% different.
Right.
Or they question themselves 1/4 of a second too much. And those things start to add up. And that's the momentum. You can't quantify it. You can never measure it, but it is real. Like, it's real. And we were on the bad end of it that day.
As a Cyclone fan, I completely understand that, being on the wrong side of what a surefire, what you think is going to be a competition turns out to not.
Not even in the Rose Bowl, but plenty of times I sat in an Oklahoma game and watched, players in the middle of the third quarter that started for Oklahoma on the sideline eating hot dogs because their day was over.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
I wasn't on many on that receiving end of many of those. Probably only that Stanford game and maybe 2 other games out of the 53 games that I played in. So I was super fortunate. And that's kind of Iowa's brand. They usually play close football, even if, regardless of if they're worse than a team or if they're way better than a team, the game is always still going to be like a touchdown or 2 touchdowns. Like, that's just the way Iowa plays football. Quite a learning experience.
Tyler, go ahead, Tim.
No, go ahead, Chris.
No, that's right. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, speaking of learning experiences, I think this is kind of a big question, but if you could kind of sum up and maybe just a couple sentences, what do you think are the main lessons you have learned, not just playing college football, but kind of on your journey to this point?
That's a question. Excuse me. I think that a lot of people think they work hard and they don't. It feels like they're working hard. And they might see success from the effort that they're putting in. Mm-hmm. But there is, I've been, this is going to sound really self-centered, but this is what I think of when I think of that question. I've been elite at 2 things in my life. And that is, at one point I was probably I thought I was a top 40 long snapper on the entire earth. And I am, through this CrossFit journey, weaving my way into the top 1% of 1% in the sport. And the amount of work that was required to get to both of those places is always almost unfathomable for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And that's on top of me being naturally good at both of those things too. I already had a head start, and the amount of work that I had to put in to be world level elite at those 2 things has been unbelievable. I think that a lot of people think they work hard and they don't realize how much more they could do. And it sounds so, I understand that's so like, oh, fuck, cool. You like train CrossFit, bro. You do so like, but it just is what it is. Like, it's the mentality of I will do right now. I'm working out 3 hours minimum a day, or when I was snapping, I would put in X amount of reps. That was probably more than anybody else put in. And I would get done and I would still feel like I could do more. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you look at the most successful people, they simply are the ones who, yes, maybe they have it intellectually. They have some of these other things that have started them a little further down the starting line. But they also just put in a shitload of work. This podcast, I'm definitely not top 1% of podcasters in the world. Would love to be. But same thing with this podcast. Like, without any ROI for a long time, for a year or so, I was just putting in 6, 8, 10 hours a week on this podcast. Fortunately, because I loved doing it and it was fun, but I was putting in a shitload of work and just not seeing a whole lot of ROI on it. And like, now I've seen it gradually increase. The more work I put into it, that we put into it, the bigger the brand gets and the better it does. And so, like, I don't know. I just think that while I've been very, very lucky, I've also been subject to the fact that, like, there's always somebody that's doing more and working harder. And that's, I don't know, probably the biggest lesson in my life. I just never want to feel like there was more left on the table. The other thing I would say that's less like sort of puff my chest out and talk about how hard I work is happiness and finding freedom. Again, kind of going back to like my job being stupid. And when I say that, I say I get to wake up whenever I want and basically have freedom of schedule every day of my life, go work from wherever I want to. They say money can't buy happiness, and it's true. I think that money takes away a lot of the stress that eats away at happiness. So there is definitely a correlate there.
Right. Yeah. I'd like to test that theory.
Yeah. But I think that truly investing in your own, you could call it mental health, but it's more of a combination of mental health and physical health. Obviously, I'm big into the physical health part of it, but like getting quality sleep and eating good food and taking care of your body and walking in the sunshine and drinking a bunch of water, like taking care of yourself and investing into your actual physical and mental, emotional health has a exponential ROI that a lot of times seems a lot of times people only look at the direct financial component of that. How much does it cost for a gym membership? How much does it cost to eat healthy? Or what does it cost me? But the return on that investment is just crazy. And when you actually wake up and you're just happy and you feel good and you're well rested, even if you don't have the fortune of working a job of freedom like I do, and you do have to go to a 9 to 5, that 9 to 5 is that time frame during the day. You're going to be so much more happy and productive and just positive in your life. And that's, I don't know. I would just say invest in your personal health.
Yeah. I
Perfect.
Very much appreciate that. Mental health is physical health and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
In your coaching that you do for CrossFit and so on, do you find yourself talking a lot about mental health along with their physical health? I think there's a big thing to that. I've gone through, I've been pretty open about my weight loss journey, yo-yo back and forth. I mean, I've been as high as 460 pounds and as down as low as 200. I mean, I remember when I gotten down to 200 pounds, I used to think once I'm physically where I want to be, I'll be fine. My life will be fine. Not realizing that mentally, there was a lot there too that I had to fix and I had to work on. Yeah. Do you find yourself working with that a lot with your clients?
Yeah, I try, I'm obviously not like the licensed therapist, right? So try not to give like too much advice on what people should do for their mental health. I know this, that if you eat good food in the right amounts, and you get the right amount of sunlight, and you do enough of the things that make you happy, and you sleep the right amount, and you move your body and sweat and exercise and lift weights, doing all of those things is going to have drastic effects on your mental health versus if you eat like shit and you don't sleep and you're hungover 3 times a week and you smoke cigarettes and you are stuck during the day not doing things that you enjoy, and all, the opposite of all of that. It's not a fix, but it's not going to hurt. Right. It's right. So there's definitely a lot of mental, emotional connection in what I do, which is like how people kind of think about food and their relationship with food and exercise. And we do talk a lot about that. It kind of stays food and exercise based, though. We don't get a ton down the rabbit hole of like mental health.
Yeah. All right, Tim, we'll wrap up with my final question that we always wrap up with. So, and then we'll you probably got a podcast to edit later, don't you, Tyler?
I got it. I literally got it edited and published 1 minute before I jumped in the call.
Look at you. 2022 Tyler is certainly a different person than he was in 2012. What advice would you go back and give 2012 Tyler Kluver?
Well, there's 2 sides of me on that one, because one side of me wants to say jump. So 2012, I was a senior in high school, and I just found CrossFit, and I knew that I wanted to at some point pursue it. And it obviously has become a big portion of my life. So important that I'm, like I said earlier, I'm treating myself basically as a professional CrossFit athlete. And if I would have started that journey of trying to be the best at CrossFit, the sports side of things, 10 years ago, I think I would be, I truly believe I'd be one of the best 30 in the world right now at it. And that's very intriguing. So I want to say, hey, don't go to college, start coaching CrossFit and doing CrossFit and throw yourself headlong into it at 18. And you'll eventually end up probably coaching, I'd be on hours. I'd be getting paid a salary. I'd probably be coaching 5, 6 a.m. classes, noon class, 4, 5, 6 p.m. classes. But in my hobby, I would be much further along right now. But I also wouldn't have all of the incredible things that the platform of Iowa football afforded me, because I wouldn't have played Iowa football. And I probably still want that in my life. So I'd probably say, wow, what a good question. And I'm sure you get that answer from everybody. What a good question. I would tell myself to always dive in and learn how to do anything that interests you. Anything. That's part of why our podcast has been successful, is because I was way back in 6th grade, and I was kind of already doing that, but I would like reiterate it to myself, like, hey, anything that you're interested in, dive into it. Just like fully immerse yourself. My best friend and I, and this may be the start of where now at 27 years old, me being a content creator and an entrepreneur comes from. My best friend and I, back in 6th grade in 2005, 2006, when YouTube came out, we immediately were like, we started making like home videos and little like comedy skits, and basically like trying to be, we had some people at the time who were the first ever creators on YouTube. And I got really into like, oh, we could like post videos and we could edit them and like put words on the screen and like just the very simple shit of editing. And that kind of like was the first time where I really had a spark of like, I could be creative and make stuff. And that later formed into like me getting into a lot of YouTube and watching people who were content creators and watching people edit videos and getting to, you know, a little deeper than your average person on microphones and technology. And that afforded me the ability to kind of understand when we wanted to start the podcast, how to do that. The more skills you have, the more weapons you have to basically monetize. Right. And so I've been lucky enough that I have a passion for fitness that I've been able to monetize. And I have a creative side of me combined with the platform of Iowa that I've been able to monetize. And a lot of people can do that if they dive deep enough into whatever their weapons are. So.
Well, it's good. I wish 2022 Tyler Kluver could go talk to 1992 Tim Johnson.
Right.
I think that's some pretty good advice.
Oh.
Tyler, now is your opportunity where we want to invite you to plug whatever you want to plug, share whatever you want to share about where people can find you, about what's going on with Washed Up Walkons, or anything else you want to share.
Sure. Nothing special. Just Tyler Kluver on all social media. Washed Up Walkons on all social media. Podcast comes out on Mondays and Thursdays. If you're interested, during the season usually is better content. So we're getting close. We got a couple months down the pipe here, and we'll be pumping out and that's usually when our listens pick up as well. Otherwise, if you're real interested and you want to lose 10, 15, 20 pounds, you can contact me and we can talk about getting you into the July challenge that I'm running. So other than that, I got nothing to plug.
No, I love it.
We'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tyler, we very much appreciate you joining us. It's been an absolute delight to get to know you a little bit more, to kind of hear a little bit of, I think, what's been a non-traditional journey compared to a lot of the guests that
I
we've
would
had.
say so. Yeah.
And I'm certainly struck by your humility. You've mentioned a lot of times that you're lucky. And I think
I promise you I am. I really
but no, I appreciate that you are not taking anything for granted and that you're seizing some opportunities. I think that's fantastic. So I very much thank you very much for coming on the episode.
Absolutely. I had a blast. I'm going to go to probably right to sleep after this.
Oh, perfect. Well,
that'll work.
Chris, anything you have to say?
No, I again, thank you, Tyler. Thank you for coming on. It was nice to hear you talk so glowingly about your podcast hosts. That's a nice change around here. So usually we try to get a jab in on each other, and it took me a while, but
if you listen to our podcast on a regular basis, I am basically the punching bag 24/7. So
you and I are kindred spirits. But no, give our sponsor a follow, Revelton Distilling Company, on Twitter, at Revelton DC. Hunter Mason live music at their tasting room this Saturday, June 25th at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa. So go check them out and give them a follow on Twitter.
Yes, excellent. And again, you can go ahead and find us on Twitter at strength_old. You find Chris at SideGrad, SideDad. You can find me on Twitter. I vacillate in and out between whether or not I want to be part of that wretched forum or not. But you can certainly follow all of our new Three Beards Media social media platforms. As Chris mentioned, we are expanding our presence there. So if you want to be on TikTok or Instagram or Friendster or MySpace or any of those things, please go ahead and check us out there.
I'll be dissing MySpace. Tyler doesn't even know what that is, by the way.
Yeah, I know what MySpace is. MySpace was lit. I had a top 8 friends.
Excellent. Well, again, we appreciate you guys joining us for yet another edition of Old Man Strength, and we will see you guys next time.
I don't want to get on the bandwagon. I'll burn that wagon down and join the band. Traveling troubadours terrorizing street corners just to try to get some supper in our hands. Now I waited all my life to get this off my chest, scream bloody murder until someone understands that it ain't about the money, the drugs, or the women. I make this noise just because I can. And we'll all join in